Hey, everybody. Welcome. Today I am welcoming an esteemed colleague, friend, guest that I've known for quite a while, and Scott Becker. Those of you that read all the various Becker's publications or have been to a conference or know him through McGuireWoods, Scott, you're awesome. It's fun to have you on. Welcome.
Well, Stewart, we are so thrilled to be with you today. I don't want to over disclose because it's so embarrassing, and we try and project a certain professional image. But as you know, I had a flat tire today, so we're recording from the repair shop. So hopefully the audio and visual and everything else goes well enough, and don't drive anybody too crazy that's here as well. But Stewart, thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate. I greatly appreciate your camaraderie over the years and your instincts and your thoughts, and just great to visit with you. Thank you so much.
It's great. And we talked offline before we started this. I love that you're in a record or in a tire repair store. It's like I've done this same sort of thing. We're busy guys. Life intercedes. We didn't expect a flat tire. So that to me makes it more fun. Scott, I got to tell you aside before I get into this. Similarly, one day my kids, when they were younger, were on our way off to one of those Comic-Con things. It was like, I forget what it's called, but it was like Comic-Con. So they were all dressed up in their costumes and their gear. And same thing, we got a flat tire. We went to American Tire. I took a picture of them in their costumes next to the tires, and there's tens of thousands of views in that post from the American Tire because it's such a odd thing to have these kids dressed up in these characters next to a rack of tires. So
It's just life. It's
yeah.
life. It is what it is. No, totally.
I
It's
think
great.
it's fun when it's just not quite so sanitized. We're all humans, we all have stuff we have to deal with. But flat tires can be one of them.
Yeah.
So today, what I've known you for quite a while, and we've sort of followed the stuff you've been doing. And as I mentioned to you offline, I remember years ago when you were first getting started with some of the things that you're doing, somebody called me and said, "Hey, I'm Scott Becker. I'm working with the Beckers, and I forget which of the entities it was, but I thought it'd be fun today to talk about, I guess first of all, for the very few people on the podcast who don't know you, about your law practice and where you started, and I'd like to eventually get into the sort of marketing and origin story because I think it's fascinating. I don't think most people know about it, and I don't know about it obviously anywhere near as well as you do. So let's start off with, what are you focused on at McGuireWoods and your background, and then we can kind of get into the marketing stuff.
Well, sure, sure. No, so I have had two core careers over the last 30 plus years. I've straddled them both. I a partner at McGuire Woods, which is a large law firm, one of the largest 30th in the world or so. Terrific colleagues, terrific place. For a very long time at McGuire Woods, 15 years, I ran the healthcare department, which is a great department with great colleagues. Just by background, serving hospitals and health systems, surgery center chains, now all kinds of healthcare entrepreneurs. And then over the last 10 years or so, a lot of investors in healthcare, private equity funds, and so forth and so on. So that's sort of McGuire Woods in the law side. Side by side with McGuire Woods in the law side, 30 plus years ago, I started a healthcare media company, and it's not very different today than what it was then. That media company is called Becker's Healthcare, and really four or five verticals. The first area we were in to start with 30 plus years ago was in surgery centers and surgery center chains. Then about 20 plus years ago, it expanded into hospitals and health systems and orthopedic and spine. Now we're in several different areas, but the two biggest areas are hospitals and health systems and health IT and things related to health IT and technology and digital health. Then we've also got some of the older lines that are in part of the company, surgery centers, surgery center chains, orthopedics and spine, and a whole lot of other areas as well today. But both of them go back now 30 plus years ago. And the origin story was I was a young lawyer in my late 20s and trying to build a practice, and started doing what people would think of today as thought leadership, just trying to present myself as someone who knew about, at that time, originally the surgery center industry. And it wasn't just the surgery center industry, but ended up doubling down on the surgery center industry. And about 5-10 years into starting a newsletter and a conference and some other things in the surgery center industry and calling it Becker's ASC at the time, or Becker Surgery Center Conference, it became clear that what we were doing in that space, more than just thought leadership to build a law practice was a really interesting way to engage with and develop and be part of a community in healthcare. And at that point, probably goes back 22, 24 years ago, we started at Becker's Healthcare, at that point, Becker Surgery Center, to hire people full time into the business, the writing, the events, and started to build a real company and a real team beyond sort of thought leadership or trying to become, a rainmaker as a lawyer or become deeper in law. Really, really parallel. Started to truly build a media company within the healthcare space. And that's been just great, great fun. It's given me a chance to meet with tremendous numbers of people and really stay connected to the healthcare environment. And on top of that, we've built a great team there. There's 100 full-time people that work at Becker's Healthcare. The CEO, partner Jessica Cole, really runs the entire enterprise today. I serve on the board and serve as chief content officer. She's the CEO and president, and she joined me literally 20 something years ago when she was a senior in college, literally, and just became a tremendous leader. I was running a legal practice. She was largely running this business and really just has done an amazing job of growing it and developing it and growing a team and a whole lot more. Stewart, let me turn it back to you so I don't just keep on talking and talking. Let me turn it back to you.
I love it. No, it's so funny because I didn't realize that you've been doing it for 30 years. So I first became aware of you when you formalized about 20 years ago. So I started our agency in 2006. And so it sounds like right about then is when you were formalizing it. Because I remember somebody on your team reached out to us about content because we were creating, we've created content too. And so I think it's amazing that it goes back even further. And I don't think we've ever talked about the origin story in any detail, but that was my assumption that it was initially to build the law practice. And what a great idea. That 30 years ago, that was hugely groundbreaking. Let's talk. So was that your own model? Did you just sort of plan that out, or were you inspired by anybody? How did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, no, it's a great, great question. There were a few things that inspired me. I mean, I would say there are three different things, or at least, and I'll try and just walk through them pretty quickly. First, there was a partner in the law firm, a guy named Bob Pristave, who had built a niche practice at that point in the dialysis industry. And I had bought into the concept of trying to build a niche legal practice. And for me, we're trying a few different areas, but the area that picked up steam was the surgery center area. And this was literally 30 plus years ago, but both independent surgery centers as well as chains of surgery centers. Back in the day, it was physicians investing in surgery centers, all kinds of stuff, surgery center centric, so building a niche practice. And that came out of a lot of following the leadership of Bob Pristave. In terms of the writing, the speaking, the trying to develop a brand in it, I would say that a lot of that came naturally versus from anybody else sort of as specific guidance. But it became, it was something I enjoyed doing. Like I enjoy the writing, I enjoy the speaking. The two favorite things I enjoy today more than anything else are the sort of short newsletter I produce in the mornings, as well as the podcasting I do and the writing. So I enjoyed it. And I'd always been I'd been one of these kids who as a kid was always starting businesses. So when I was in the practice of law, you had to be a great lawyer, but you also had to be a business builder. And so I always thought of it as multifaceted, not just one or the other. So I would say it was sort of Bob's guidance to be niche centric in the law practice. And then I would say it was my own sort of mix of instincts and trying to build a practice. And I would say the third thing that goes back to is when I first started my legal career, it was at a mega, mega firm. And the firm I'm at now, McGuireWoods, where I've been at for 30 years now, has grown into, a $1 billion firm, a very large firm. But at the time when I was first getting going in law, this was in 1989 or so. This is a long time ago, not to date myself too much. But back in the day, law firms were very, very dog-eat-dog places. And those lawyers that had clients were in good shape. Those that did not have their own clients were treated like dogs, were treated like literally, it could be Friday night, You could be a 50-year-old lawyer and somebody tells you, you got to be here all weekend doing this. And of course, you got paid very well. And so you did whatever you had to do, but it was no way to live as what was called a service partner. It was a brutal environment back then for service partners. So I'd say beyond sort of the natural marketing instincts, beyond watching Bob build a niche practice, I was very intent on being what's thought of as somebody that brings in clients and controls their client base, just because I never wanted to treat anybody poorly, but I didn't want to be treated like that. And so I wanted to have control of my life. Similar probably to the instincts that caused you to at some point build your own firm. You at least have freedom, you have control over your life, you have some autonomy, which was the only way to do that in a big law firm back in the day, particularly, was to have your own client base. And so I was very intentional about trying to build a client base. And this being solely in healthcare and a niche within healthcare became my vehicle for doing so.
I can't believe that is so funny. And I knew when I asked you to do this, we'd have so much in common and stuff we never got around to talking about. So what you just mentioned there, I'm going to back up and talk about my background just for a second. It's so funny. There was a guy when I worked at J. Walter Thompson, which is a big agency, and and it's like was the big show when I was 28 years old to work at this place. Wasn't fun at all. It was really political. And there was a guy on the client side named Paul, I won't use his last name, who was just treated like dirt by his own client team and internally in the agency. And I thought, I never want to be in a position where I have a job where people can push me around when I'm 50 and treat me like I'm an idiot. It was exactly the same thing. Like, I can't bring myself to do that. And that's when I became much more of an entrepreneur. And then the second part of this, so that guy I still talk to my wife has heard this story. Like, I don't want to be that guy. Like, or I just have somebody treating me like dirt when I'm in my 50s. I can't bring myself to do that. And then the second part of it was I stumbled into the sort of thought leadership thing accidentally and on purpose. And so when I left J. Walter, I did some other stuff, and I was recruited to work for this little company that was working with doctors in the day. And that's back when the ASCs that you're working on were becoming big deals. This is like in the 90s. And so I was a speaker. I'd never spoken publicly in my life. And I took this job where I had to speak in front of, at first workshop groups, then the big audience. And I liked it and I was good at it. And the funny thing is, Scott, it played to my strength, and people trusted me and hired us. And I was just being me and I was educating. And when I started this company, I didn't even recognize that I had a reputation because I never thought about building my own business. I was doing it for this other company, but I had a reputation. And so I leaned into the thought leadership. We did a column for dental economics. I sold audio CDs in medical economics. We've been doing our own seminars periodically. The blog, we started our blog on the very first day. So anyway, it's just the commonalities are amazing. I love it.
No, it's fascinating. For people don't know, because we're probably from around the same generation, J. Walter Thompson, Ogilvy on advertising, Ogilvy, Leo Burnett. These were huge, huge names in the agency world back in the day. Now so many of them have consolidated and merged into the other firms and so forth. But it's exactly, they were very similar professional environments. And it was a different world in terms of how people were treated and so forth and so on. And like you have the example of Paul, there's an example of a Terry and a Robin and some other people that were these great lawyers, but were really at the whim of the partners that had business and just didn't want to be in that situation. And so that was a lot of the motivation and drive. You talk about the speaking and the writing and so forth, and the things that you and I both enjoy. And part of what happened is when I was trying to build a reputation and build a brand, I would try and get on the agenda to speak at other conferences. And of course, they were all tied up. And so no one would allow me to speak, or very little. I'd have to beg for speaking engagements. And that's when we started our own conferences and so forth as well, because we just couldn't get access to being in front of the audience, being in front of people, being in front of potential clients, and growing a practice. So we ended up starting ultimately our own conference in the surgery center business, and then later on conferences in the hospital and health system business, and so forth and so on.
That's amazing. It's so funny because we did our own seminars. I figured out I've spoken at a couple hundred seminars we did over the years. And like we did those for a while. They're like every other weekend we were doing seminars, and it's fun. Let me ask you this, like the benefit, have you noticed this when people see you speak or they've been following you for a long time? Do they feel like they already know you? Because I bet you feel that, people have been following you. It's like they listen to you, they know you. And do you ever meet people like that? Because that's always a lot of fun, I bet.
Yeah, no, I would say so. I mean, there's different things that happen over the years, and we try not to take them too seriously or take them one way or the other. But like I was in a restaurant one time, and I've got a bit of a distinctive speaking voice because it just how I speak. And some guy sitting a couple of seats away from me, and he's in from out of town, and he recognizes me because him and I have been on the phone for podcasts and stuff like that. You have those kinds of things. The other thing that happens is when for a period of time I looked a decent amount younger than my age, and I'm getting to the point where it's no longer the case, so sadly, but we would have I would have people that every once in a while would ask me, did your father or did your grandpa, who started Becker's Healthcare? And that was always fun for me. They're like, there's small ego moments that you can't help yourself but enjoy, but it is what it is, and you try not to take too much out of them. But some of those things are, of course, they're very touching when you get comments like that, when people, recognize you or know you or whatever. And it's a great pleasure. Not in a million years did I think that we'd be in a spot where more people know me than I thought they would. And it's all good. It's like we're like, like all of us are tremendously flawed people, and we have some things that we do well, some things we do poorly, and it's life.
So it's so funny again on that comment. So I often joke with people on the marketing stuff, like, look, I'm horrible at basketball. I'm horrible at a lot of this one thing I'm good at, but a lot of things. And it's like, and people seem to appreciate that. I have another question for you that see if this is parallel for you as well. So, by the way, if my mom were still alive, she would say, you really should have been an attorney. And it's like, that's the one thing that is always fun for me. And the one thing about law, I know you probably would argue there's good lawyers and bad lawyers, but you at least have to have a license. In marketing, anybody can say they're a marketer, right? Anybody can. So for us, the thought leadership has been really helpful from a competitive standpoint to help us just stand out as differentiating because you have to be the real deal too. You can't just jump up on a box and start talking. You have to actually know what you're talking about. But I mean, law is super competitive, even at the level you guys are playing, which is the highest level in healthcare. You're like one of the leaders. But do you feel like beyond the fact that you're getting inquiries, do you feel like that's been a big help to you over the years, just in terms of the credibility and helping you win the business that you want to?
Yeah, I think yes and no. I think certainly from a credibility standpoint, but what we talk about internally a lot in the law firm over the years is you could have all the mass media you want to have, but at the end of the day, business is still done person to person, client to client, and so forth and so on. So I could do all the mass marketing I want and all the mass media that we've done and have a company with my name on it. But at the end of the day, for people to trust you as their marketing advisor, for people to trust me as their lawyer or their legal advisor, their business advisor, they have to know you and feel like you're connected to them in a very real way. So it certainly helps, but there's, at the end of the day, it's hand to hand combat to really build a practice. It's one to one. It's really getting great clients, taking care of great clients, and growing with those clients. And that, of course, serves as references for other clients. So I'd say I view the marketing, and we talk about this regularly too, sales versus marketing. Marketing we view as sort of ear support, but at the end of the day, and again, the military cliches in a world where there's real military conflict are so annoying. I get that, but at the end of the day, one-on-one contact. When I was really building a practice, it was on the phone, one to one. It was talking to people one to one. It was every Tuesday morning, emailing the top 20 people I was working with. It was regularly group meetings. It very much is a very, relationship driven business to go with the ear support or the media. And I think, great organizations have both. But you can never forget that at the end of the day, somebody hires Stewart Gandolf to really help them think through and grow and execute. Somebody hired us back in the day, or it still does, the firm, to really take care of what their needs are, their deal needs are, whatever they're trying to do, and that's very hands on. I mean, it's really a still people centric thing.
So it's so funny. Again, my team would laugh if when they listen to this. I actually use the same metaphor about ground troops and air war, and I talk about, and I actually have. You just posted something of that in your newsletter recently, and you did it again about another 3 months ago. And I put it on LinkedIn. I quoted you with the whole idea of marketing and sales, the difference, and you need both. And we get people that reach out to us all the time that are hoping especially B2B when they're doing B2B and they want to go out and get to influence doctors. I'm like, you do have salespeople, right? Because like the stuff we do is not going to do it for you. We're going to help provide airware, but you need ground troops. And you'd be surprised how many people really naively think that just the marketing is people are just going to start calling you, which, that'll happen, but to leverage all that effort is amazing. So I love that. And actually that leads me to my next question with you. So, you've got the chops from being, a leading respected lawyer, right? You've got that. You now have respect as, sort of a healthcare publisher, but these days you're talking a lot about business. And so I'd love to learn, have you learned all these, that wasn't, you didn't go to, business school, I presume. You went over, if you did, it's been a long time ago, but you're learning about business. Is it from learning from your clients and insights? Like, 'cause you're bringing great stuff on your sort of summary. And I hear this business stuff, which isn't really law. It's not really healthcare. Like, how are you getting those insights? Because I think they're great.
Sure. No, it's a great question. So I was just by background, aside from law school, I'm a CPA and a finance guy as an undergraduate. So did a double business major. Was always interested in business. I've always been interested in business. I viewed the law as a profession and a business. We're in the media and healthcare world and the business of media and healthcare. So I've always viewed things through a business lens, and have sort of then spent a ton of time over the years reading on business and so forth, to almost to the point of ad nauseum, where it stresses me out because I always think I should be doing more when I'm reading about business and stuff like that. So I've always been business centric. I think what I would say is, and your point is so well taken, probably 5 to 10 years ago, we tried to sort of broaden my brand from being viewed as a healthcare person to being viewed as both a healthcare and a business person. And I would think that's probably part of the effort. And I just enjoy it. I mean, I've spent 30 years in the healthcare world. I continue to live in the healthcare world, but have tried to broaden the brand beyond healthcare to business as well. And it's a constant work in process. And I wrote a book about business things, and we try and that's really a business book, not a healthcare book. And we try and still stay very engaged. We serve on a couple boards of directors. I serve on a big not-for-profit board, and we find those things very, very interesting. And we just find it to be just part of lifelong learning versus anything else. And we find it to be great fun. I mean, I'm always like, I'm whatever age I am, I'm still trying to figure out what I do for the next 10 years. And so we try and make sure that we're engaged and busy and thinking and learning and connecting with people.
That's great. And so another thing that comes up a lot because this whole thought leadership thing is fun for me and you obviously, and I would say I'd love to get your insight on this. So when people look at what I do and what you do, it looks pretty easy, I think, from the outside. And it's like, okay, I have a 20-year head start on you. Like, we can start these tactics today, but or 30-year head start on you, actually, as it turns out, just like you do. Would you ever have people that ask you and or talk to you about these things, like about thought leadership, or have you found that they, underestimated or overestimated, or does that even come up? It may not come up as much in your world as it does in mine.
Yeah. So what happens is, it's a great question. So over the years, I've been at the law firm forever now, and for a very long period of time was leading parts of the law firm, served on our board and so forth. And so I was regularly having discussions with younger lawyers about building a practice or building a business. And then, and still have regular calls with people, almost daily, with somebody calling about some kind of discussion, or they want me to talk to their colleague or their son or their daughter about business or whatever it might be. And so what I would used to say about in the law business was multiple different things. But I would say, so of all the people that would come to talk to me, you would have a handful of those people that would really pursue it, that would really continue on and try and build practices. And if they tried to build practices and if they really put the effort into it, one way or another, most of them ended up being really successful in doing so. And many of those are really successful partners at the law firm today who have eclipsed my own success and so forth. But for every 5 that really went after it, 40 probably didn't. The other thing that I'll tell you is, if you're at a place like J. Walter Thompson, and you could understand this completely, you ultimately have, at some point in your career, almost 2 full-time jobs. You're serving clients of J. Walter Thompson, plus you're building your own client base. And at the end of the day, there's almost no way around it. There's a period of time in life where those are almost like 2 full-time jobs. and you're just sort of doing both. You're both taking care of clients and building a client base. The other thing that we talk about often is, where I'll go down two different threads very quickly, is one of the keys in any business is building great teams. As you start to build that team to take care of clients where you could leverage the team some, then you've got more freedom to be building the business too. So you're doing both side by side, but they become a little bit easier as you start to have a team taking care of a lot of the things for the daily client work that needs to be taken care of, as long as you're hiring fantastic people and they don't require tremendous amounts of management. You're hiring great people, so you're building teams, and that makes it easier as well. And then we do talk often about, niches and customer centric, because you want to really be taking care of customers, whatever business you're in, really well. So you don't have to keep on repeating the cycle of customer acquisition. So there's a lot of things we think about, but at the end of the day, we talk about it being, it's a full-time job, building a professional practice, a professional reputation, a business, and then taking care of the clients. You end up with different periods of time straddling a couple full-time jobs in a way.
No, for sure. And I think there's so much to unpack there. We'll have to have dinner and talk about this stuff in more detail sometime because the uh, looking at that the amount of energy it takes, I would say on the thought leadership side, number one, you have to like it. And I think there's some natural skill at it. Like I had no idea I could speak until I had to. Fun fact, my first speech I had to do wasn't for an hour, Scott. It was for 3 days. And I'd never spoken publicly in my life. And now I had to keep an audience for 3 days. And I got locked at the elevator stopped and locked me on the way to my speech. My first, so I was
That's
stuck for
wild.
and so, and I got through it though, because I knew my material. And it's like, wait, I can do this. And I hadn't, and at the time I was taking some challenges and some risk and was like, I'm just going to go do this. So that I'm jumping without a net and I'll figure it out. But it all worked out. But there's so that I think there's a little bit of a talent, but there's certainly a drive and you just have to keep going. And that's the point I was making that since day one, we've had content going out, every week at least, with a very brief break during COVID because we had other issues. We paused for a couple weeks, but the it's a commitment thing. I think you really have to be good at it. And the other part you just brought up about the two full-time jobs, and philosophically, it's exactly that. Like I work on both sides. I love the client side, but I still keep the content side going because that just is the elixir that solves so many problems because of that thought leadership. We're not panicking over getting new clients because clients come to us and we would want to take care of them. And I guess the question what I'd like to lean into as we get close to wrapping up here is you just brought up there was something that's really hard that hasn't always been easy for me is hiring the right people. And you've had to, doing a law practice as well as starting a business. Any tips for us? Because that's a lot what you're doing, running such different businesses, like
Yeah.
hiring right or time management or anything like that. Because help me, please, because I'm still learning this stuff, like for sure.
Yeah, no, we always think about hiring as, the thing that the number one lesson I would take about hiring is the uncertainty of it and embrace the uncertainty of it. So, and what I mean by that is it's always an educated guess. I try and start with criteria, whether it's grades, scores, people staying at the same job, having professional references, you know, there's smart enough, there's personal skills, there's drive. But what I've seen throughout my career is the following, and this is why I think of it as an educated guess, and you can't over or underestimate too quickly. I've seen so many times where people came into a law firm or a media company or any business, and somebody had already decided those people were the next perfect fits, the next perfect people for the firm, or the media company. And as often as not, those people would work out or not work out. I've also seen time and time again, people come in where people underestimated them because even though they might have had great credentials or great grades or great work ethic, they were high motor people, but not necessarily big out in front of you personalities. So people underestimated, and so many of those people that were, the lesson I take away from all this stuff is you don't really know what you have in people until they've worked with you for some time. So when you prejudge, that person's going to be a star, that person's going to suck. As often as not, you're going to be making an error. And so we try not to prejudge too quickly. We hire people, we understand it's an educated guess, and we have to figure it out over time. And some of your best people weren't great in their first job at the company, but they're great in their next job. It's you can't prejudge too quickly who you're hiring and how great they're going to be. So that sort of is one. The second thing that I try and be very clear with our managers about is it's very easy for managers to get gun shy about hiring if they've had bad luck with a couple hires. And this is something we want them to absolutely avoid getting into that mindset. We view every hire. In some jobs, hiring is easier, and I don't want to simplify too much, but if I'm hiring a technical job, often people have the technical chops or they don't, and then they have the drive to keep on doing it and the diligence, or they don't. There are other types of jobs. Sales is a perfect example of this, where I'd say the hit rate on a technical job might be 70%. The hit rate on hiring a salesperson might be 30%. Yeah. And that's not because, but just the nature of the job is different. They require different kinds of skills and more intangible, more subjective, more other types of things until they get going. And then they're very numbers driven. But certain types of jobs are much easier to fill a spot with. Others, you're going to go through more people to get the right people. Easier to hire a technical person who's something great than a great manager. And you often don't know what you have until you have people for a while. So we're big on not prejudging. We're big on our managers not getting scared. We don't want them making a ton of bad mistakes on hiring, but we absolutely, worse than that is getting scared to hire, because then you could never grow and build the next team. If I was going to give you one more thought, and this is something I'd read 100 years ago from business author I used to read a lot, a guy, Jeff Fox or so, when I was younger building practices, and he had this concept that you want to avoid. And his phrase was, I think, sevens hire fives. And what you want to always encourage people to do is hire people that are as smart or smarter than you, as good or better than you, and I often talk about, and Stuart, I'll go on for one more minute. I promise I'll shut up in a second.
We're good.
but we talk of the evolution of a founder in three phases, and this goes to that point. A founder first is doing everything. Like when I was first building Becker's Healthcare, I was doing the agendas, I was running the conferences, I was talking to the hotel, doing everything. Then you go to the next stage, and it's the same in any business. You go to the next stage, and you start to hire a lot of people, and those people aren't necessarily better than you, but they're still allowing you to leverage somewhat. So you go from 0 to 2x just because you're getting some leverage. That's the second stage of being a founder. The third stage of being a founder is everybody you've hired for a different director role is better at that role than you are. And that's not false humility, but you get an editor-in-chief who's better than you'd ever be as an editor-in-chief. You get a person who's running the sales side who's better than you'd ever be on the sales side. You get somebody who's running agendas. Yes, they're going to take your input, but they could do it better than you can. And that's when a company could go from 0 to 2x to 10x, to use phrase of the day type things, because you've gone to this evolution to now you've hired people that are all better than yourself. And one of the errors we still see people making, I just saw it in another organization I'm involved in, is the lead of something, hire somebody who he doesn't feel threatened by. And this is, no, you don't want to be threatened by your employees, but you better be willing to hire great employees, great teammates, because that's how you really create systemic, great organizations. And so bear with me. I hope that's helpful, but that's how we view the evolution of a founder.
I'm eating this up. I appreciate the extra time we're spending. So that leads me to another question then, because this was something that was sort of a back pocket question I had for you, but I think you just led me right into it, which is, all right, so you're dealing with, presumably pretty big companies a lot of times when you're in the law chair. And you're being engaged when you're doing the lawyer side of it to be the lawyer. How often does the business stuff come up where it's just like, okay, we can talk about this, but like, this is something I just want to talk to you about. Does that ever come up for you? Because all that insight on the business side of it, when you're making a business decision versus a legal decision, I'm assuming that comes up pretty regularly.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I don't practice law at the level I did at one time, where you're in the middle of everything. But I'll tell you what over the years, what you find is, you have different kind of clients, and I'm sure it's very much the same with you, that value you in different ways.
Yep.
So some clients, you are wholly their business trusted advisor. Like I served on a couple clients' boards forever, where they valued both what we were doing on the legal side and executing, and on the business side. And certainly some of my partners, Holly Buckley, Amber Walsh, Jeff Cockle, Bart Walker, people value them both for the legal and the ability to think and understand business and the business they're in, and a lot more than that, just naming a couple names very quickly. And then you have other clients that very much, I remember a client, a really, really bright client from a huge organization, and when I was younger, I might have been more impulsive and injected my business judgment. And the client was very clear, you're not here for your business judgment. Yeah. You're here because we need you to get this stuff done. And the last thing I want is you in a meeting injecting your business judgment that might in some ways be different than my business judgment. And I'm the client, you're the agent. He was right. He wasn't wrong. He was right. And different clients work with you in different ways. And, we always say to people in organizations, in some situations, you're a 1. In some situations, you're a 2. And meaning, in some situations, you're the leader of the project. In other situations, you're a part of the project and a teammate in the project. And you have to be able to live in different roles. So, like, I'm an operator in some places. I serve as a board or an advisor in other places. And my job might be to give some advice, but I can't go too far on it, because I don't want to go back into the shoes of that person that's running it. And so I could give advice, but they ultimately have to make the final decisions of where we're going. So I think it just depends a lot situationally on where you're at and what you're, and obviously there's other clients that treat you just like a vendor, and that's not very fun, as you know. But at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, you understand where you sort of wanted to, we're there for this purpose, or we're there and they want your business judgment or advice in a different ways. It just depends on the client. Of course, you develop deeper and closer relationships with those clients that want to work with you holistically, but you really appreciate the others as well.
Very good. Thank you, Scott. This has been fantastic. I know that any events, any events coming up, or I can put whatever links you want in the description.
Sure.
You'll want more for your newsletters or events or anything you want to talk about?
No. I mean, we've got 2 big events coming up. We've got the Becker's Healthcare Annual Meeting coming up the end of April. We have the McGuireWoods Healthcare Private Equity Conference coming up in May. Both big events, but whatever is great, and we're very excited for all of them.
So I've had the pleasure to participate in the McGuireWoods Conference forever, and we're actually going to be participating in some of your conferences this year, at least one, and looking forward to the Becker's side of it as well. So I'll see you in Chicago, at least one of those, maybe a couple of those pretty soon, Scott. Scott, this was fantastic. I knew it would be fun, and I thought the origin story would be, I don't know if you get a chance to talk about that as much, and it's like, to be the star of that story is always fun. So you did, as I knew you would. It was an awesome discussion. So thank you for your time.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me on. What a great pleasure. Thank you, Stewart.